It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. If you've ever wondered why so many Trump voters think the way they do and believe what they believe, then you'll want to listen to this one, because Eoin Higgins has blown open the right-wing propaganda conspiracy fueled by just a handful of tech oligarchs who used their immense wealth to buy not only influence, but influencers. They co-opted dissident voices and turned them into propaganda mouthpieces. If it weren't so devastating for democracy, one might regard this as a brilliant piece of social engineering. But the damage done by just a few of the richest people in the world, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and others, has been immense. Brace yourselves. Here's part one of my conversation with Eoin Higgins. Welcome to the Ken Harbaugh Show. My guest today is Eoin Higgins, a journalist and author who has blown open the conspiracy, I think it's probably fair to call it that, of tech billionaires buying influence and influencers to shape so many of the narratives we take for granted today. His latest book is Owned: How Tech Billionaires on the Right Bought the Loudest Voices on the Left. Welcome to the show, Eoin.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I am fascinated by the motivations, not just the actions, the motivations of these billionaires and how much of what they do is driven by greed or vendetta, or sometimes, and I find this to be the most terrifying motivation, tech utopianism. But before we get into that, can you summarize what they have achieved by co-opting these incredibly influential voices on the left and building a new kind of information ecosystem?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great way to lead into it, I think. These billionaires, I focus mostly on Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, and to an extent, David Sacks. And for anybody in your audience doesn't know, obviously, I think they probably know who Elon Musk is, right? But Peter Thiel is a billionaire investor who was an early in the door for Facebook, and also helped found the company Palantir, which does a lot of like data processing and surveillance stuff for the national security state, and Mark Andreessen was one of the people who invented Netscape Navigator back in the 90s. And then he also became a VC, and, he invested in Facebook and became, fabulously wealthy through that. Oh, I should also say that Thiel and Musk, both were kind of behind PayPal. So that's kind of how they became rich in the first place. And then, Sacks is kind of one of these PayPal adjacent guys. So, that's kind of who these guys are, right? Like as far as their money goes. And politically, they all are relatively right wing and have been for some time. I think Musk is maybe the exception to that because his politics were always like a little bit fungible, maybe like a little like flexible. But over the past decade, certainly these men have all become very public about their right wing politics. And with Trump coming, I think that Trump's first administration kind of gave them the opportunity to make a lot of money, although they made a lot of money under Obama, and they would make a lot of money under Biden as well. This is kind of a bipartisan problem, I think, of just kind of the kind of rubber stamp contracts. But even though that exists, right, that's not enough for these guys. Like they want more than that. And one of the things that they really objected to was political media specifically, which they felt was not being fair to them, and they felt was kind of pushing a quote unquote like liberal agenda. And their response to this was to kind of create these alternative right wing media ecosystems where they would kind of just plow money into it and give money to whoever. To whichever platform they wanted to, so that people would kind of start to leave institutional media and critical independent media and kind of come over to these platforms and not have the newsroom, not have, editors, and all this stuff. None of this stuff by itself, at least as far as like the apolitical stuff that I'm talking about here, is really a problem. I use Substack, which is one of these services. I used Colin, the David Sacks run podcasting network. I don't think that these independent media platforms are a problem per se, but I think that when they start to kind of uniformly push a right-wing agenda, as we've seen, especially over the last like 5 years, pre-COVID and then certainly post-COVID, then you start to have a problem. And now, after Trump got, after that attempted assassination, just missed him, then they kind of used that as a moment to kind of publicly come out in support of Trump. And that is a bet that I think a lot of people probably thought was not a good one, right? Like that they were not being, that they were not making like a savvy choice. I certainly didn't think that Trump was going to get reelected, right? So I didn't really understand why it was, the move to make for them, but it did pay off for them. And that's kind of the situation that we're in now. And that's why we have, Elon Musk in control or with oversight over all of these agencies. We have people like Peter Thiel and Mark Andreessen having a lot of influence over the administration. We have David Sachs in the White House as this crypto czar. These are already spectacularly wealthy, powerful individuals who now have access to these levers of power.
How do you think about the adjacent tech billionaires, Zuckerberg, Bezos, the others who don't have the track record that the subjects of your book do, but have lined up pretty speedily behind the Trump agenda? And it was especially alarming to me when Bezos canned the op-ed in the Washington Post right before the election and suggested that, maybe with all of the data at their disposal, these guys know something we don't.
That's a really interesting question, actually. Yeah. I think, so I'll get to that last point. Let me just kind of go over these guys. I think that's really interesting. I want to kind of think about it for a minute while I'm talking here. But Bezos and Zuckerberg are interesting test cases, right? Because these guys have given a lot of rhetorical support in the past to kind of like liberal causes. None of it has ever been particularly sincere, right? Like it's always been kind of like a reaction to what's going on. So in 2014, to go back that far, Mark Andreessen, who is on the board of Facebook, or at least was at the time, made some comments about India and colonialism that were, there's really no other way to put it, like pretty racist, right? And he was kind of excoriated online about this, and Zuckerberg took the unusual step of like kind of coming out and saying, that's not what we're about. This was kind of, a step in Andreessen's journey to the kind of more far right figure that he is now. Zuckerberg also, I believe in like 2020 during COVID, during Black Lives Matter protests, was kind of, more open to these kind of like liberal causes. And in both of these cases, I think it is an example of him taking these public positions because it's good for the company, and because I don't think that Zuckerberg really has a lot of really firm beliefs, right? I think that, like politically, right? I don't think that he really believes in much politically. I think that he kind of just believes in techno-utopianism, as you said before, techno-optimism, believes in the company, and that's basically it.
Hey, it's Ken. Quick break to let you know we've got a Substack page for the Ken Harbaugh Show. If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, check it out. A lot of you already have. Thank you so much. And if you're able to, please subscribe. Every dollar goes back into the show to help with research, production, and reporting from places like Ukraine. None of this happens without your support. Thank you. Welcome to the resistance.
I think that if Harris had won, I think Zuckerberg would be a total Harris Democrat. Totally. And there's no question about that, right?
Yeah.
And Trump has won, so now he's a Trump-loving tech bro. So I think he's just kind of flexible. I think he's morally flexible. I think that that's kind of what it is. Bezos is a more interesting case, I think, because this is a guy who made a really big deal out of buying the Washington Post and saying, I'm not going to be involved, right? I'm going to take a hands-off approach. And again, I don't know. This is just my speculation. But I think that for him, he probably thought, look, if my newspaper endorses Harris and Trump wins, there will be negative consequences for me because Trump is a very thin-skinned, vindictive and vengeful person. If I endorse Trump, or if I don't have the paper endorse anybody and Harris wins, there will be zero consequences for me because the Democrats they don't play that kind of game, right? So I think for him, it was probably a pretty easy calculation to do it that way. Now, I think there's kind of a separate question is like, where are his politics really? I would argue that his politics are probably like maybe a little bit more heartfelt and conservative. And the reason I say that is because he gave this directive to the opinion page that they're going to, that he wants them just to talk about like liberty and like, like these are certain things that seem not to be negotiable, right? For the opinion page. Like, if you're going to write for my opinion page, you have to like, endorse free markets and I think it's like, liberty. So these are kind of vaguely defined things, but usually these are like kind of code word for kind of right wing politics. And as I point out in a separate interview, is that really the way that he feels? Like, is he really going to open the door to people writing about like Amazon's, monopoly on like, I don't think so. Like, right. But that would be an open market thing, right? Is he going to give people the liberty to write about like the positives of unionization? I don't think so. So it's that little dig at his hypocrisy aside, right? Like, but I think that the real thing here is that he's kind of like stepping down onto it and saying, no, we're going to do this. And that is a more, I think, from a kind of apolitical, just kind of like objective analysis, that's a kind of more interesting politics to me than Zuckerberg, who just doesn't, again, who I just don't think really believes in anything.
Yeah, well, I would interrogate that even further, this characterization of their politics as right wing, because in some areas it's absolutely not right wing on some social issues, but it is almost always in the direction of libertarianism and letting them make as much money as possible. Isn't that what it's really about at the end of the day? And they might fool themselves and think they're striving for a multiplanetary species or whatever Elon's latest thing is, but it's really about money.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that, Musk's politics, if we can talk about him for a second, maybe he talks about multiplanetary. He talks, he's been saying that we're going to get to the moon and to Mars, for years now, and it's never come through. It's kind of hard to even say that he lies, because I don't even know if he like even thinks about this stuff before he says it. I think he's just constantly like his own hype man, right? But yeah, ultimately it is like libertarianism, or a type of libertarianism. In the book, I quote this professor Olivier Joutel, who's from New Zealand, who originally from America though, and I chat with him quite a bit. And he says, behind every libertarian in Silicon Valley, there's a big fat government contract. I mean, right? So federal money has been supporting Silicon Valley for so long.
Palantir, SpaceX, Tesla with carbon credits, every single one of them.
Yeah. You name, go back like decades. It's just, before, the Bush administration was like a huge, like you're saying, Palantir, right? Like they were started with seed money from In-Q-Tel. This is all federal money that's going into this industry and into this sector. But even before that,
and In-Q-Tel is the CIA's incubator. Is that right?
Yeah. CIA's incubator, where basically it's their way of, and I don't want to suggest that this is like some kind of a secret. This is public. Like what they do is they give seed money to these companies, and the expectation is that these companies will then produce a product that the CIA or some other aspect of the U.S. national security state can then use. Is started in the wake of 9/11. As many of these national security things were, and a lot of these funding that they've gotten from the federal government comes out of that moment. So, I think that for a lot of these guys, they find it difficult to kind of reconcile their idea of meritocracy with the kind of anti-libertarian, just getting federal money way that they've made their cash. And I think that where they kind of come down on it is like, well, we make the best products, so of course we're going to get that money. And ultimately, and I think this is kind of what you're getting at, right? Like, ultimately, does that ideology really matter that much? Do those like personal politics matter that much? Because ultimately what these guys are interested in is making more money.
That was part 1 of my conversation with Eoin Higgins. Part 2 comes out on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. And remember to check out the Ken Harbaugh Show Substack page. It's free to sign up. Thanks, everyone.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.